Now, as Darrell Clarke returned to Bristol Rovers, he appointed on a 3-year deal, marking a high-profile "I'm back" moment after relegation to League Two. A massive change in fortunes for Bristol Rovers is hopefully on the horizon. Plenty of vision, plenty of strategy going forward. Clarke's promotion pedigree over the last sort of 10 years has been incredible, as well as director of football Ricky Martin, who's had experience in the Championship as well. So it does all look sort of set to be a bit of positivity returning to Bristol Rovers next season. In terms of how they operate, Dan, our Bristol correspondent, is going to look a bit into how things are going to work, how Bristol Rovers are really going to look in this new era that they want to build. There's certainly some immediate priorities in terms of rebuilding the squad, but maybe rebuilding the morale involved as well. Dan, how important is that? How important is the recruitment this summer as well? Obviously, you want to instill winning mentality very, very early on to make sure that promotion is the final goal. So, Dan, can Clarke recreate his magic and push for immediate promotion? What roles will they play? Will the fans be behind the rebuild? Will there be a rebuild that takes place this season, or will it take a few years to come? How's it all looking in terms of the gas at the moment and where they might end up at the back end of the new season? Because it's certainly a prospect that is getting a lot of fans feeling excited.
Well, Charles, it's a very different setup now at Bristol Rovers compared to what we saw last season, especially at the end of last season. Of course, new manager, new assistant manager now, and director of football Ricky Martin coming in, hoping to steady the ship and bring in some good transfers and just knit the club together, because it was becoming a bit of a mess, if we're honest, towards the end of last season. Of course, Darrell Clarke, new head coach in charge of the team, and his new assistant now just recently appointed in John Stead. So lots of different people coming in to the Memorial Stadium, lots of change, and hopefully change that will inspire success at the club following what was a disastrous end to last season. Of course, when Inigo Calderon first came into the club, things, as we've mentioned on many occasions, were looking quite rosy. They won a couple of big games, and in fact were looking relatively safe from relegation. But then came the slide, and they just went down and down and down the table until ultimately they just couldn't seem to win a game or even pick up a point. Never mind, I think they did pick up a point away at Wrexham, which was a bit of a turn for the books. But apart from that, they were drawing a blank on most occasions, and then ultimately they just couldn't get out of the rut that they found themselves in. So things had to change, and they have done at the gas. And so, as I mentioned, we found ourselves at the club with new people in charge, new people pulling the strings and making the decisions. And for Bristol Rovers supporters, they will hope that they are people who know what they're doing. Ricky Martin and Darrell Clarke, when they've spoken in interviews, certainly have talked a good talk so far in terms of their ambitions and direction for the club, in terms of what they want to see. Darrell Clarke has made clear just how hungry he is for success. Ricky Martin has spoken about the direction of the club and the ambition that they want it to have, and working in tandem with Clarke himself. And of course, John Stead, who's just been appointed as well, feels as if he is a good fit for the club to work alongside Darrell Clarke and indeed Ricky Martin as well. So I think at the moment you just got to take them on face value in terms of what they say, because we can't really judge until the games start flowing. Of course, in terms of the director of football, the manager's point of view, yes, perhaps if transfers start to come in as well, we can look at what we think of those. But in terms of actually playing, there's not a lot that can be said. So the direction of Bristol Rovers still remains to be seen. But in terms of what's been said in the interviews by those involved, in terms of the decision making, they seem to think that things are going in the right direction once again after, as I mentioned, what was a really poor end to last season, where the direction of the club it left a lot to be desired, to be honest. There was a lot of questions around it, of course, with the ownership structure that had come into the club as well. So people were thinking, what is now the case with Bristol Rovers? Now we have some sort of an idea in terms of where they want to be, and a lot of good talk being done by those at the top end of the club. It's now just a case of making sure that they deliver on their promises that they've made.